Some notes, finishing up on the intentional torts, and then a little bit into our next topic in tort law is negligence. So our chapter 18 and 19. The remainder for intentional torts, things to know that there are different ways to be paid out when suing. So we have three categories here. Compensatory damages, which are awarded to compensate the plaintiff. So look at that word compensate is in compensatory. So whatever the defendant has done wrong, they should pay the plaintiff for it. So mainly money, and usually it's, you miss work, you get lost wages, or if you have to go to the hospital and things like that, they want that defendant to pay for it. There's also nominal damages, which is maybe $1, but it's more symbolic. You're at fault defendant, so you might have to do something like move your fence, or just pay $1 to accept the fault. Then there's punitive damage. This is usually a large amount of money, and you can see the word punish is in there, punitive. Punish that defendant so they don't do it again. Maybe a large company did something, you want to sue them for millions and millions of dollars for punitive damages so that it sets a precedent and they don't do it again. Intentional torts-like crimes can be broken down in different categories. So there's, again, those that we talked about that injure people, like assault and battery and infliction of emotional distress. But a person's reputation is also protected by the law, and that's defamation. So there's two kinds there. The oral talking about statement that harm your reputation or slander, so you can slander someone by talking poorly about them. Then there's written statements, which are libel, and you can be awarded damages for those as well. They must prove that the statements that were made were false, and there must be a third party involved. Because if I just say something to you, that doesn't harm your reputation. But if I say something where other people hear it, that definitely harms your reputation. So slander's out loud and libel is written down. Other things that could harm property. So you have real property like your house, your fence, your crops. You have personal property, which are things that can be moved like your car and your clothing. Then your intellectual property, so things that you have created or made. And there's laws protecting all of those. Also, real property like trespass and nuisance laws will protect your real property. So you can't go on my property. You can't be loud outside my house at all hours. And if it affects the way I live, I can sue you. Then, of course, there's personal property, and it's protected by something that's called conversion. So where a person unlawfully exercises control over the personal property of another person. Driving my car around for no reason. Taking something from my office, from my house, and using it and then returning it. And then there's intellectual property is protected by patents and copyright. So patents protect useful inventions such as the process or a machine or a new product. To receive a patent, you must create something that has never been thought of before and then get that patent. And once you are granted a patent, you have now a monopoly. Anyone who tries to sell that product is liable for infringement on that patent. And once it expires, though, it's now in the public domain and anyone can create that product. So you have to re-up. Copyrights protect anything that was written down, recorded, created. However, unlike patents, there's no formal process. So once you make your expression, you have a legal copyright. Copyrights last a lifetime of the authors, once the author dies, plus another 50 years. If someone copies that, again, it's infringing on their rights, and you can sue for that. So that's kind of the conclusion of intentional torts. Now chapter 19 is negligence. So negligence, the biggest thing here for negligence is there are 4 areas that you have to fulfill. So intentional torts, you did something on purpose. You harmed someone, harmed their property. In negligence, you failed to do something. So you have a duty. That defendant had a duty of care to the plaintiff. If you don't follow through, you have breached that duty. The duty was violated. Then there's 2 other areas, causation and damages. Causation, the defendant's conduct caused the plaintiff's harm. So because I didn't do something, for example, if I'm a lifeguard, my duty is to watch over the people, make sure they're safe. If I fall asleep, I violated that duty. Someone fell in, was harmed, and it resulted in some damages. So actual damages. They had to go to the hospital. They hurt their head. They were drowning, something like that. So you have to fulfill all 4 areas in order for it to be negligence. In a case, a judge and a jury are instructed to follow what is known as the reasonable person standard. So a reasonable lifeguard does not fall asleep. If they fell asleep, they violated that reasonable person standard. So what does the normal reasonable person do in that situation? In some states, there's contributory negligence, laws that will protect defendants if plaintiffs avoid. So maybe it's at a pool and the plaintiff sees a do not dive and they avoid that sign. That could help the defendant because that person didn't follow all the warnings or guidelines. There's also comparative. Maybe who was at more fault? Maybe the lifeguard was falling asleep, but they also avoided a sign, so maybe there's only a certain percentage would be awarded to the plaintiff. And that is negligence and the rest of intentional torts.